Welcome to the 700 Club. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia says he wants to join the Abraham Accords, normalize relations with Israel. But there's a catch: the promise of a Palestinian state.
Well, in a White House meeting with President Trump, the two leaders agreed to a new security deal and billions in economic investments. Paul Petit reports from Jerusalem.
In the first visit by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to the White House in 7 years, President Trump is moving to deepen security ties and civil nuclear cooperation with the world's largest oil exporter, a relationship the president has made central in his second term. The Crown Prince told Trump he wants Saudi Arabia to join the Abraham Accords and normalize relations with Israel, but only if there's a clear path toward a Palestinian state, something Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insists cannot happen.
I don't want to use the word commitment, but we've had a very good talk on the Abraham Accords. We talked about one state, two state, but I think you have a very good feeling toward the Abraham Accords.
Yes, definitely, Mr. President. We want peace for the Israelis. We want peace for the Palestinians. We want them to coexist peacefully in the region, and we will do our best to reach that day.
The two also signed an agreement making Saudi Arabia a major non-NATO ally with the U.S., mirroring the security arrangement long in place with Israel. It includes selling F-35 stealth fighters and 300 U.S.-made tanks to the kingdom. MBS has agreed to invest $600 billion in the United States, with the goal of pushing that investment to $1 trillion. Responding to a question about the 2018 murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, Trump defended the Crown Prince, saying he did not know about the operation, directly contradicting U.S. intelligence findings.
About the journalists, it's really painful to hear, anyone that been losing his life for, no real purpose or nothing illegal way, and it's been painful for us in Saudi Arabia. We've did all the right steps of investigation, etc., in Saudi Arabia, and we've improved our system to be sure that nothing happened like that, and it's painful and it's a huge mistake, and we are doing our best that this doesn't happen again.
And today, in a separate diplomatic track, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is set to meet in Turkey with a senior Hamas delegation to shore up the ongoing ceasefire in Gaza. Hamas is defiant about disarming, but the U.S. is expected to push that demand as it works to keep the truce alive in the Gaza Strip. Paul Petit, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, we pray for peace. We pray for peace throughout the Middle East, and especially in Jerusalem. The problem is, and it's a deep problem, the ideology on the Palestinian side hasn't changed since 1948 and actually predates that. If you look back in the history, the Hebron massacre of 1929 practically mirrors what happened on October 7th. That hatred is deep and it runs generationally. So to say, okay, if we just create a new Palestinian state, suddenly there'll be a desire for peace and prosperity. People will want to build futures for themselves, their children, their grandchildren. But the reality on the ground is the ideology is so deep that people are willing to sacrifice their children. The Hamas was willing to sacrifice the entire civilian population of Gaza in pursuit of their goal of wiping Israel off the map. Without a recognition that that ideology has to change, and change fundamentally, and change generationally, I don't believe you can put a state behind that. It really doesn't make any sense. So we'll see. We hope and we pray for peace. In other news, Texas Governor Greg Abbott designated a Muslim advocacy group right here in the United States as a foreign terrorist organization. Ephraim Graham has that story and more from the CBN Newsroom. Ephraim?
Gordon, Governor Greg Abbott issued a declaration on the Council of American Islamic Relations, accusing it of supporting global terrorism and having had ties to Hamas. CAIR says the governor's declaration has no basis. The declaration means CAIR cannot purchase property in the state, and it gives the state attorney general authority to take action. In 2008, the U.S. government listed CAIR as an unindicted co-conspirator in the conviction of the Holy Land Foundation for providing Hamas millions of dollars. Congress passed legislation requiring the Justice Department to release the files of its investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. It comes after months of opposing the release. President Donald Trump said he will sign the bill. Brody Carter has the story.
As many of us who are looking at our phones know that the Senate has passed the bill under unanimous consent.
Lawmakers moved quickly Tuesday, voting to require the Justice Department to release the Jeffrey Epstein files, a watershed moment for survivors after years of calls for transparency.
I know everybody sees us today as grown adults, but we are fighting for the children that were abandoned and left behind in the reckoning.
The yeas are 427, the nays are 1.
A nearly unanimous vote, except for one lone no vote from Republican Clay Higgins of Louisiana, who opposed it on privacy grounds for victims and subjects of investigation who were not criminally implicated.
Well, Mr. President, Donald Trump has tried to cover up for Jeffrey Epstein long enough.
The Senate quickly approved the bill, and it will head to the president, who has said he'll sign it. A change of direction he made earlier this week after long calling the push for the files a Democratic hoax.
I'm all for it. You know, we've already given 50,000 pages. You do know that.
On CBN's Faith Nation, chief political analyst David Brody said the president wants to get this behind him.
Politics, you know the deal, right? When the train is starting to leave the station, you get on board that train. And then let's be honest. I mean, the president might not want to hear this, and the White House might not want to hear this, but that's exactly what happened.
The push for transparency is already having consequences. Larry Summers, the former Harvard president and Treasury Secretary in the Clinton administration, announced he's stepping back from the public eye, saying in a statement he's deeply ashamed for staying in contact after Epstein pled guilty to soliciting a minor for prostitution in 2008.
The DOJ has 30 days to release all unclassified material, though Attorney General Pam Bondi can still withhold sensitive information related to active investigations. Brody Carter, CBN News.
America is standing up for persecuted Christians in Nigeria. It came at the United Nations Tuesday. UN Ambassador Mike Waltz joined rapper and singer Nicki Minaj and a group of faith leaders to speak out for religious freedom. Minaj spoke of the churches burned and Christians driven from their homes and killed. Waltz said an entire faith is being erased, one bullet at a time, one torched Bible at a time. Open Doors, a group that supports persecuted Christians, says believers in Nigeria are targeted by Islamic militants. Nigeria's president says the government is working to protect all religious minorities. Closer to home, thousands of U.S. Marines are now some 15 miles off the shores of Venezuela in one of the largest military buildups in the region. CBN's Wendy Griffith has this report.
As the U.S. military holds exercises in the region, President Trump is weighing his options, saying he's open to talks with President Nicolas Maduro, but military action remains a possibility.
I don't rule out anything. We just have to take care of Venezuela. They dumped hundreds of thousands of people into our country from prisons.
The world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, is now in the Caribbean as part of what's being called the largest military presence there in decades. It comes as the U.S. conducts airstrikes on alleged drug boats. The administration says it has so far destroyed over 20 vessels and killed more than 80 people. The president says Maduro is responsible for the intervention.
He's done tremendous damage to our country, primarily because of drugs.
Brad Bowman, senior director of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, told CBN's Faith Nation why he believes President Trump is flexing America's military might.
The president, at a minimum, is trying to cast a shadow of power, if you will, over the negotiating table to get concessions from the Maduro regime. And he may be preparing for additional military action. But it remains to be seen whether they will conduct strikes inside Venezuela, which would be both legally and politically a much more serious step than what we've already seen with the interdiction of these drug boats.
Venezuela's government alleges the real reason behind the U.S. military force is regime change.
I think what he'd like to do is get Maduro out, convince Maduro you're done. You were illegitimate. You stole the election. You don't belong there. You're engaging in narcotics. You've caused a ruckus. You should leave.
Meanwhile, Maduro ordered a massive military call-up of his own, some 200,000 troops, while publicly calling for peace and proposing a face-to-face meeting with President Trump. Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
The story will continue to follow. Gordon?
Well, absolutely. We'll continue to follow it. It's the largest military buildup by the U.S. in this hemisphere for literally for decades. And to see this, is this the Monroe Doctrine writ large? Is it echoes of Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly but carry a big stick? I think regime change, Maduro absolutely stole the election. So are we enforcing that? Venezuela has been a problem for decades, and the socialist experiment there certainly hasn't worked. And the mass exodus of people and the extraordinary poverty of people there is frankly shocking given the amount of natural resources they have. So if they want to export that problem to our shores, I'm all with the president for no. Do we go to war? I'm not so sure I would be in favor of that. You just can't be in favor of that kind of action. But given what Maduro has done and what he is doing to enforce his own rule in Venezuela, I would absolutely support, well, that needs to stop.